Hi friends, long time no see. My bad. I may or may not have put entirely too much on my plate again. I know, we're all surprised. Like, give yourself a minute to just, oh my gosh, I can't believe that Lily would do that again. This video is going to be a sort of like introductory video to Genesis before we get started. So yeah, let's just get into it. The first thing that I want you to know is that Genesis is traditionally attributed to Moses for authorship. It is one of the books that Moses wrote. But obviously, because the books that are attributed to Moses also account for Moses' passing, someone else had to also be there. So when we say that Moses wrote it, it was probably Moses and a couple other priests, maybe also Joshua in particular, but by and large, generally speaking, Moses. As far as dating for the authorship, like when it was written, Moses was alive in like the 14 to 1300s kind of time frame. That's when the Exodus happened. That's when all of that was going on. So like,
how would you word that? The late 1400s? It bothers me that BC is backwards. So I don't know. I guess that's late 1400s. Into 1300s. Someone make me a meme out of this. I'm sure Katie will.
And then as far as like the dating that's going on in Genesis, this is going to be like primeval history, starting with essentially the dawn of time, right? But then for the patriarchal era, so Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, this is approximately the 18th century BC. So next up is why it's written and who it's written to. And it's important that you know this. Start over. Next up is why it's written and who it's written to. And it's important that you know this because Genesis has a sort of reputation on the street for being literal at all times, but Genesis wasn't written to be literal, or maybe a better word is exact at all times. And what I mean by that is the way that we think in like a sciencey, mathy way, like STEM is a pretty big thing in the US. That's not how the ancient Near East operated. They weren't people of exactness. They were people of like philosophy. They were people of thoughts and ideas and spirituality. It was not like, oh well, thing is like this exact number. Like I can tell you, you know, this pen is a 0.7 like pen size, like the writing part itself. Whereas for them, like their measurements were in cubits and things like that. It was a lot more, like I said, philosophical. And because of that, when we read Genesis, and that's not to say that it could not be at any point having any kind of exactness or something, but that when we read Genesis, we should not be looking at it for like science answers, but more so answers for our soul and for our being. And the ancient Near Eastern people were worried about who they were, why they were here, who they belonged to, what God should they worship. Because remember, everyone had a God, at least one, and ancient Near Eastern cultures around them, pagan cultures around them, had usually a God for everything. So again, this pen would have a God, and the tree outside my window would have a God, and the sun in the sky would have a God, and the fish in the creek over there would have a God, and my cat would have a God. It's a polytheistic, and incredibly cuckoo banana pants sometimes culture that the nation of Israel, the people, were being like backed up against, and they needed answers to refute the cultures around them, the Canaanite gods or the Egyptian gods or the whatever, the Moabite gods. With that in mind, understand that Genesis is an answer to the questions that they would have had. They weren't worried about whether or not like the sun was a certain temperature and how far away from Earth it was, and whether or not it revolved around the Earth or the Earth revolved around it. But more so, who created the sun? Because the Egyptians, they said that this God created the sun, and they said that this God created the moon, and that this God created the earth, or that these gods were over all of these things, or that these gods were of all of these things. And the rebuttal to that is that no, your gods are weak at best and imaginary at worst for you, because Yahweh, our God, is the creator of all these things and the sustainer of all these things. He made everything. I think of like Colossians, it's like in the teens of chapter 1, where it talks about how like Jesus created all things, and they're created for him and by him and in him and through him, and he is the center of it all. It's a similar theology for them. The creation narrative is rhythmic and poetic and illuminates who God is to all of mankind, the creator and sustainer. From there, the story shifts focus and zooms in on the birth of the nation of God's people, a people group who had the pleasure and benefit of knowing him closely so that they could be a light to the nation. As far as an outline for the entire book, chapters 1 through 11 is Primeval History, and then chapters 12 through 50 is the Fathers of the Faith. But I will put it down below. If you have questions, again, let me know. But so Primeval History focuses on the creation narrative, the birth of sin, the righteous and the wicked, and then the flood, a new creation, the rebirth of sin, and then the righteous and the wicked. It follows a pattern, so to speak, and we'll get into that when we start reading. And then for the Fathers of the Faith, chapters 12 through 50, we have the Abrahamic Covenant, the Promised Child, God's works in Abraham's life, the Anointed Heir, God's works in Jacob's life, the righteous and the wicked, the chosen leader, the suffering servant, the rise of a leader, brotherly love, the prosperity of God's people, the prophetic blessings, and the end of the fathers. There you have it. I hope that that was helpful. If you have questions, like I've said a bajillion times, I feel like, let me know down below, or let me know during the Zoom studies, or of course you can email me. I think most of you know my email by now, but I will also have that in the description down below. See you soon.